So I have now read or watched all 36 Shakespeare plays in the first folio, so let's debrief on that. So hi, if you don't know me or if you've never seen anything to do with me before and you don't know who I am and why I've been reading or watching all of these Shakespeare plays, I'm an actor. I'm 22, soon to be 23, but yeah, I'm an actor, and I felt intimidated about the fact that there were some plays that people would mention and be like, oh, I like Shakespeare, I like this one, or I've done this one, and I'd be like, I don't know that one. And I want to put out a disclaimer that there's absolutely no need to know all of the plays. You can have every right to like Shakespeare and feel equipped to do a Shakespeare play without knowing all 36. I feel like maybe that goes without saying, but I feel like I let the fact that I didn't know all of the plays, and some of the plays that I knew in advance were quite like more niche compared to the more known ones. So I felt like because I didn't know all of the big known ones, that I had no right, despite my training in Shakespeare and learning to like perform classical texts, I felt intimidated talking about it with other actors, which I think is a common thing for a lot of people. So I wanted to introduce people to them, which is why I did a series on here, giving a short introduction to each of the plays as I went through them. And I went through the comedies in one video, and then the tragedies, and then the histories. But I thought now I've had a bit of time with that knowledge, I thought I'd debrief on the whole process and on Shakespeare as a whole and all of his works, which is actually quite a big topic to debrief on, but let's go. So I think something that stood out to me is like, what have I actually retained from 36 plays? Because I've spoken to people who have done certain plays and they've been like, yeah, I did like Titus Andronicus, and they name which character and I'm like, oh, like I have seen Titus Andronicus but I don't know which one that is, because I think like with the comedies, everyone's sort of interconnected in a web of different romance and love triangles and love squares, so it's easier to connect and know which one's which. Whereas in the tragedies and in the histories, sometimes it's harder to know who's who, but especially in the tragedies, I think, because there's lots of different stories that we cut between and different like threads to the narrative that it's harder to know. So I feel like it's okay that I don't know every single character by name. I know the story of the plays and I know the vibe of the plays and I know my initial instincts on the plays and my impression, which is just like me as a girl looking at them. So I feel like looking at different interpretations and speaking to different people could really sway my perspective on it, because I've gone through them like each once or like twice if I knew of them before. So I think it's given me a good foundation to be able to like do any of these plays in the future, because I already have a baseline initial understanding of it. However, like if you name a specific detail, I might not know, but I think that's okay. And I thought I'd also address some of the topics that people wanted me to cover in the comments, so shout out to Claire for suggesting that I talk about the women. But I think there are so many different categories and so many different types of women that people talk about in Shakespeare, because there are women who cross-dress, so they dress up like a boy in order to get like male privileges, like in Twelfth Night and in As You Like It, there are strong female characters who are expressed through them presenting to other people as men, and then like they're shown to be intelligent and like they're given a bit more power and autonomy in the story, which I think is interesting. And also in some of these, that is then in the interpretations shown to explore more sort of like narratives surrounding gender identity or bisexuality because of the cross-dressing element. So there's lots of different ways in modern interpretations that people can take it, and I don't exactly know how Shakespeare was presenting it back in the day. And I think there's also women pranking men in Merry Wives of Windsor because he's trying to steal a rich husband's money. So like these middle-aged women string him along, prank him, embarrass him. So I think humiliating men is interesting because I didn't expect to find that in a historical classical play. So that was something that stood out to me. And there are some women who are very much in love in the comedies, but I think people say about Juliet that Juliet dies in a sort of man way because she dies using the sword, which is typically what like men would do in battle and stuff, whereas poison would be more considered a woman's way to die. And that was what Romeo died via in the final scene. So I think that's interesting because Juliet's really chasing what she wants, despite her being very much defined by her love of someone. Like, she does have a lot of like power and like big speeches. So I think there's a lot of speeches for women. There's Joan in Henry VI has a lot of power in strategizing the war from the French side against the English in part Henry VI part 1, I think. So there's quite a variety, but on the other side of things, there's also the taming of the shrew, which some people take seriously and some people don't, because it's about taming women. It's about this woman's difficult and like she's got a personality and she speaks her mind and she's not just like a passive wife. So let's like tame her. And it's really quite disturbing because she's like starved of food and she's like forced to be like this submissive wife and like what a woman should be, which people don't know if that's like serious or like not serious. Like, how are we meant to take that? Different people have different perspectives on that. So there's quite a variety, and there's also some women who really drive the plot, like in Lady Macbeth. Like, she is so driven and she is telling her husband what to do and she's like influencing everything. So there are quite a few different powerful women throughout Shakespeare. I feel like I could talk about it forever. But I think it's interesting to see all these different categories, and also the fact that like middle-aged women are given a voice in the Merry Wives of Windsor is nice, as well as like there's a lot of young women roles, and young women roles with a lot of autonomy, and also young women roles where they're just really obsessed with men, which is interesting as well. Like, there's quite the variety, like with Julia in Two Gentlemen of Verona. She's just really obsessed with a man and she forgives a man who like really, I don't know whether she should be forgiving him, but that's an interesting one as well. There's also a lot of questionable moments as well, like in Measure for Measure, Isabella is a nun. She wants to be a nun, but her brother is being threatened with death unless she like marries a man, and she doesn't really want to marry a man, she wants to be a nun. But then the happy ending of the play is like her having to marry the man and her brother being saved. So like, is that okay? I don't know what the point is meant to be, and like nowadays they tell it a lot as a story about like coercive control as well, and it is presented as sort of a darker story. But was it meant to be like a happy story where it's like she finally like sees sense and stops being a nun, and like I don't really know what it's meant to be. And also there are women doing bad things, like obviously Lady Macbeth is like wanting people killed, like that's not the way to get power. And also Helena in All's Well That Ends Well, like she tricks someone into sleeping with her. He thinks that she's dead, and then like she's actually pregnant with his child, and he's not consented to sleeping with her, he's consented to sleeping with someone else. So that's obviously like, so there's a mix. Like, I could say that like all of these interpretations of women are like presenting women in a good light, but equally there's a mix of women in the world, obviously, and like being able to tell nuanced stories and tell stories where people don't do the right thing. Like, we don't do the right thing all the time, no one does. So being able to tell that and have interesting stories to portray as female actors is useful. So I think it's interesting, and I feel like I've read so many plays that like it will take me a while to process like which moments I want to explore the most as an actor, because I've just been overwhelmed by new knowledge. Like, I feel like it's quite overwhelming taking on all of the plays in the time frame that I have. Something else I wanted to talk about is sort of like the queer element with like, is it LGBT representation? Like, I think a lot of it is sort of hinted to, and then like modern adaptations really bring that out, like with Twelfth Night, as I've said, with like the like cross-dressing and the romance triangles and the way it works out, like it sort of is explored more from that kind of angle. But also there are some really strong male friendships that could be more than friendships in these plays. For example, Antonio and Bassanio in The Merchant of Venice, and also like in Julius Caesar, the conspirators to like kill Julius Caesar get really close, and like I don't know if it is romance or if it is just people do say that also, like, I guess it can be interpreted different ways and we can explore performing it from different angles. But I think something that is nice as well is that in the past, men, I think, were more open with telling their friends they love them, and I think that's really important to show love and care for your friends. And I think sometimes in the modern world, maybe some men shy away from doing that a bit more compared to in the past, where people would be like telling their friends they love them. And I think that's really important regardless of who you are, to tell your friends you love them. And also what stood out to me was that the comedies, histories and tragedies as categories aren't always what I expected. Like, I think the comedies are easiest to access, in my opinion, because they feel like little sitcoms. There's lots of different tropes surrounding like mistaken identity, there's marriage at the end, and there's love triangles, and there's people getting tricked, and there's like magic in some of them. Like, there's common tropes and jokes and like witty dialogue that comes up, and like, to be fair, there's witty dialogue throughout all of the different categories, but there's enough tropes that come up again and again and again that are like typical sitcom sort of tropes, that it feels like a sort of predictable sitcom and you're less like confused by the story potentially. For me personally, I found it easier to understand the comedies compared to anything else. But then I think some of the most famous big name Shakespeare plays that you think of when you think of Shakespeare are in the tragedies, so I think there's that familiarity with those stories that is really useful. So I think that is helpful in accessing the tragedies, and I think the tragedies are really interesting because there are funny moments in it. Like Timon of Athens, there is opportunity for comedy in it, there's opportunity to make it really tragic as well. And then the histories, I'm sorry to say, I thought would be really dry and boring, but actually they're really quite interesting. Like, some of them are these grand battles and like wars, like Henry V, and like there's a few different ones like that, but then there's also some that are just like pub banter features a lot in like Henry IV part 1 and 2. There's a lot of like drunkenness, and I thought I'd also do which plays do I think are underrated. I love Richard II because it's all in verse. The speeches are like really long and beautiful verse speech. He compares himself to God quite a lot as well, which is like, why has this man got a God complex? And he really struggles with the identity shift of not being king anymore, so it's got some really interesting themes, but also like he's so over the top that it feels a bit silly in places. So I think it's really fun. And from the tragedies, I fear I'm going to miss out some recommendations, but I mean, I can't talk about every play in this video, but I think Antony and Cleopatra is really interesting because it's about a passionate love affair between two world leaders who actually existed. So like, looking at that as a grand romantic tragic affair and story, it's got war, it's got these like grand stories that cross over multiple countries. Like, it feels so big as a story and really interesting. Also, Love's Labour's Lost, as much as I find it a bit complicated because there's a lot of different characters, like there's like 4 main women and 4 main men, I think. Like there's a lot of characters, so I found it really difficult to follow, but I think as a concept it really drew me in because it's about men that try to like stay celibate for a year to prove their love to women, and I think that's really fun as a concept in modern performance to like put that on stage. Like, I think that's quite underrated and not looked into enough. And one that made me feel quite strongly, plays that made me feel like, I don't know, like worked up, were Two Gentlemen of Verona. I think this man Proteus is so toxic because he's making all of these promises, exchanging tokens with Julia, and he's a man in Verona. Then he goes off to Milan and he tries to steal this girl that his mate's really interested in. He's messing it all up for his mate and himself, and he's really trying to like force himself onto this girl who doesn't want him. Sylvia doesn't want him, and I think it's interesting to see that like she then forgives him and it's meant to be a happy ending, but like that's not okay. Like, you can't tell someone you love them and then run off with someone else and like betray your best friend. Like, it's also wrong. So even if they do match up into like neat little couples at the end, I still don't think that's right. And I think the cheating and the manipulation and the like, it's not nice. But there is a dog in this play and there's not a dog in the other place, so I mean, various different thoughts about that one. And also King Lear is interesting as well, because I mean, it was changed for hundreds of years because it's just so dark. It's so upsetting and horrible, and I struggled to watch it all in one go. I had to watch it in like 5-10 minutes at a time because it's just deeply sad. I feel like I want to address also the process of me going through it, because I started this in like early September. I knew of some of them before, maybe like 8 of the plays before. I don't know, I can't remember. But I started in September and I finished this task off like early April. So that's how long it took me, but also I just invested a lot of time into it because I found it really intense and really difficult, but I also, once I dedicate myself to a task, like I want to commit and get it done quickly. You don't have to do it in any specific time frame, but I just thought I'd address that, and I've like approached it in different ways because there are audiobooks, there are texts online which have line-by-line translations, and that gives you more of an insight into the text. Or if you watch it in a performance angle, then that, like, watching a performance of it makes you feel more the energy of it and the emotion of it, which will vary between different adaptations, but that's something that's useful to understand the action of, because I think sometimes if you're reading it on the page, like, you lose a bit of a sense of the action because you're not visually seeing it, or I do personally. And there's also some like podcasts and talks where they go through it and then they like chat about it with actors and then they go through a bit more. So there's a variety of different ways you can approach it. Let me know actually any of your thoughts in the comments. Let's debrief and let's chat about Shakespeare even further, because I understand as well that I don't know everything. And I hope I'm not sharing misinformation, but please do tell me more in the comments, or let's chat about some of the different plays, because I think it's nice to be able to open up the conversation and not feel intimidated out of the conversation. So that's this video. Please do subscribe because this has taken a lot of time. It's been really challenging, and please do share these resources as well because I feel like this is something I would have really wanted to have seen. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!